Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we've got lots of registrants from over 33 countries around the world, so really pleased you can join us. My name is Ciara O'Sullivan. I work on the International Schools team here at Century, and I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting this webinar in partnership with Cognita. Now, just in case you're not familiar with the Cognita School Group, they are a group of over 85 world-class leading schools around the world in over 12 countries. Over the past 15 months, we've had the absolute privilege of launching Century, or AI technology, with 45 of their schools. And it's been incredible to watch how they've effectively deployed and embedded our technology across their school group. I can safely say on behalf of all of us here at Century, we've absolutely loved working with you and continuing to do so. So today's webinar is entitled Cognita, the Digital Journey, Embedding and Integrating Technology Across the Classroom. And I think I can speak on behalf of all of us in saying that we've had a real digital journey across the past year. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers joining us today who are going to be sharing their insights into how Century has supported them across as school leaders. Century has been embedded in the schools. It's been incredible to watch this academic year alone. They've answered over 5 million questions on our platform, which is absolutely fantastic and a real testament to them as school leaders in the way they have deployed our tech. So let me chat you through today's agenda. Starting off, we are going to hear from Fergus Hamilton, who is our Head of Customer Success here at Century, and he's going to be having a fireside chat with James Carroll, Director of Education for Cognita UK. They are going to be discussing the Cognita journey so far, the group's vision, and the role that technology plays within this. Moving on from that, we're then going to have a series of presentations. Firstly, we'll hear from Hastings, a school in Madrid over in Spain. They're going to be chatting about the role technology has played and where Century fits within this. We'll then move on to the team over at Northbridge House in North London. They're going to be telling us a little bit more about their school, their digital strategy, and their use of Century as well. And towards the end of the presentation today, we've got 10 minutes set aside for Q&A. So please do be sure to make use of the Q&A box. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen. Please do feed in your questions and we'll pick those up towards the end of the webinar. Last thing to say is that today we're using the hashtag Cognita Digital Journey. So please be sure to tweet, to post. We'd love to see your engagement on social media. So we will be looking out for those. Without further ado, let me please introduce Fergus Hamilton, Head of Customer Success here at Century, who's joined by James Carroll, Director of Education at Cognita UK. Fergus and James, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ciara. Hi, my name is Fergus Hamilton. I'm the Head of Customer Success here at Century. So my team has the pleasure to work with our many schools all around the world, including, as Ciara says, for the last year or so, 45 at Cognita. So James, it was about this time last year that I think we first met each other in slightly more frantic circumstances, perhaps, than they are at the moment. But that wasn't the beginning of your introduction to Century. I know that you've been in touch with us for a while. It'd be great to hear just a little bit about how Cognita came to be finally working together with Century back last summer.
Yeah. Thanks, Fergus, and hello to everybody. And please, if you've got any questions or anything that you might hear today, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But I can remember, actually, it was back at Wellington Festival of Education back in probably June 2019 when I was first introduced to Charles. And I can remember he was out in the outdoor area with his stall, and he talked me through this platform. Which was my first introduction, and it all seemed a little bit too good to be true. So the use of AI, the use of data, and actually making purposeful interventions and how it could bring the learning journey to life for students. And then shortly after that, we actually had a bit of a pilot run at Northbridge House at the tail end of that summer term. So that was July 2019. And at that point, we saw potential We saw great potential in the platform. We saw how it could support our students and be able to bridge that learning from the traditional classroom to being able to extend it back to the home. Then I don't think any of us could write what was going to happen 6 months after that. So it was about March 2020 where I think Charles picked up a phone call from me saying, I think we've got an issue here. We are likely to be closing schools very soon in both Spain, the UK, and Switzerland. And can we have a look at Century, and can we think about how we could open this potentially up to our students? And not long after that, Fergus, I think we then began that conversation around how really could we actually roll out the platform to our schools in Europe in the time frame that we had. And at that point, it seemed, you guys seemed incredibly confident, which was brilliant. But of course, from our perspective, we were dealing, as many schools were around the world, with so many unknowns for our schools, our school communities, and how we were going to provide some continuity of learning. But we were able to work with your team to be able to get a number of schools set up very quickly. The IT teams work very closely together, but we were able to get logins. And then it sort of moved on to the people aspect as well. And I think that's where we really began our work together, is how do we actually take people on this journey?
Yeah, and I think that's certainly in the many experience that I and the team have had, working with schools like you and with school groups, is the people element's very important. We can create logins standing on our head. We know how the platform works. We can organise trainings, all the rest of it. But it's really how does it work for you? How does it work for your teachers, your students, your parents? And actually thinking about the people on that journey and centering around them is obviously so important, which you guys did so well.
Yeah, and I think that was probably one of our biggest challenges, because we, as schools, as a school group, we've been quite used to rolling out strategies and programs, but you often had the luxury of being able to do it face to face with people. So not only were we navigating remote learning, we were also doing sort of remote learning not only for the students in our care, but also for all the teachers. So we were having to sort of build that professional development model in the background as well, working alongside your team who were brilliant in supporting us. And within my team as well, I've got digital advisors who work both in the UK and in Spain, and they, Andy and Sabrina, have been absolutely integral in bringing together people. And I think bringing together the professional development within schools, delivering it remotely, working with your team as well, filling people with confidence, because every school was at a slightly different place. So it was very difficult to say one size fits all. But I think we both had to be quite flexible on both parts, looking at how we understood the needs of our schools, whether it was Spain, Switzerland, or the UK, and then determining the needs of training where the schools were going to use it, getting SLT sponsors involved, getting digital ambassadors, teacher pioneers, to be able to sort of turbocharge remote professional development as sort of an integration.
And James, so there might be, I'm not sure who else is on this call, but there might be other people, perhaps from groups, who are thinking, okay, I too have a diverse portfolio of schools, different key stages, maybe different countries. What were some of the tactics that you deployed to make it work for all of those different needs, or perhaps Andy and Sabrina employed as well?
Yeah. I think one of the things we established quite quickly was that probably full school rollout initially was going to be a bit of a challenge. So what we identified was maybe a year group, a department, to be able to spearhead that. Because one of the best things is to be able to cascade that experience. So Andy and Sabrina work very closely with colleagues in schools, and I think you'll hear from Jonathan Gunzi in a second as well. And he very much adopted that, finding some pioneers, finding some people who wanted to take that risk. Bearing in mind they're navigating how to work teams. They're trying to understand how online pedagogy differed from face-to-face pedagogy. You're on mute, you're not on mute. So all of these sorts of things were going on in the background, but being able to identify some pioneers and champions within the classroom really enabled us to build that momentum And they were able to actually rally their teams within schools to be able to move schools on at a pace that suited them, but still delivered the online learning experience for a very diverse group across the portfolio.
And obviously, the pandemic in one way or another been very present in all of our lives for more than a year. But obviously, your journey with Century initially began before anyone had heard of COVID-19, and now, hopefully, touch wood, fingers crossed, we're starting to move out of it again as well. So, as well as being something that was very useful in the pandemic, it'd be interesting to hear how you see it slotting in your wider strategy, in a world where COVID isn't our only consideration.
Yeah, and I think quite early on, Fergus, we went through that discussion and we actually saw the potential quite early on that this needed to be something that wasn't just a quick fix, that it was going to add true value to learning for the long term as well. And where we are now, we are hopefully, and I know there will be many people on the call who are not in this position, but we're beginning to see some green shoots and some light at the end of the tunnel in the UK and within Europe. But specifically within the group, our main areas of focus over the next 2 to 3 years are going to be around some specific areas. So EdTech is no surprise. I think it's unlocked a huge potential for us. We rolled out a one-to-one device program from year 3 onwards, starting in September this year. So all of our students in Europe from year 3 to 13 have now devices, which in itself unlocks so many doors around engagement, which weren't there before. So EdTech's a significant focus, and within that we'll be looking at how we reduce teachers' workload, how we support accreditation by sort of building professional development. And then sort of after that as well, we have a real focus on our teams, so people and developing people, and how do we use things like data to make purposeful interventions and to bridge the learning gap for students who have had a very disruptive 18 months as well. So there's going to be a significant focus on people and developing people in the next few years. And that links again with data. And I think from your perspective, Century and the way it provides data is second to none. So we will have a focus on the use of data to influence change. Now, data analytics, learning analytics, not only through the academic, but through also hopefully through the well-being as well. And then that links finally to our final priority, which will be the continued focus on well-being, both of our students and of our teachers. And if I think about, well, how does Century fit into
that was my question, right? People are an online platform, it's more screen time, it's not a human connection. Yeah. How do you link not just Century but any EdTech with that wellbeing strategy?
So I think it definitely needs to come in balance. You need to be able to build that understanding of screen time within the student body, within the teacher body, but also with parents as well. We've worked really hard because parents, the last thing they wanted was one-to-one devices going back, but we've really worked with them to understand, this helps bridge the learning, but for well-being, particularly for teachers, not necessarily the screen time, but it's really focused on workload as well. So access to the high quality resources, the question banks, being able to personalize learning through the use of Century will definitely help that. And then we think about time saved around feedback. So students are going to be getting spontaneous feedback. It's going to support teachers with what they're doing face to face, and it marries up with a very robust offer for our students that minimizes teacher workload. And then finally, you can't really get away from the link with data as well. Is you have such access to rich data, which you can then use to build at different levels. So you can, from my perspective, we can look at it at group level. We can then look at it at school level, but obviously teacher down to the individual student. And from a teacher's perspective, you would hope that having access to that type of data will reduce the amount of time they have to spend collating it. I know many schools will collate data and analyze data in different ways. But we're in a really, really great position now to be able to take what was an amazing tool to support us in the pandemic to actually look forward and how that's going to drive learning within our organisation going forward.
And another group of users who get access to data as well is, as you say, the students. I think hardly anyone probably works a job where they don't have to interact with data in some way or another, and having those sorts of interactive but accessible dashboards for students is quite a good kind of entry point, I think. Or certainly that's the feedback we've received from students and from teachers. And so, yeah, going forward, as you say, you've got the very diverse portfolio of schools. You've got various strategies. What do you think will be some of the challenges going forward in implementing some of these strategies?
I think as we've probably got across our schools now, our schools are all at very different points. So we would have had some that had the capacity, and a lot of it was about capacity for change in those particular schools. So some schools would have been able to really move forward very quickly, and some would have taken a much more gradual pace. So it's been able to now understand how we build communities to peer support as well. So, for example, I think we've called on Jonathan, as many people have across the group, to be able to talk to other heads, to be able to understand within Hastings how they've been able to build a digital strategy and vision that has now become a core part of moving that school forwards. So he's been able to share that expertise. So some of our schools that may be earlier on in their journey, been able to capitalise on those opportunities from schools like Hastings, from Northbridge, to be able to support them in their journey. And that is going to be key for us in the next 18 months.
Yeah, and that's something also we also seek to foster in the Century community as well. Not all of our schools exist in large school groups. But what's really nice working in the education sector is people really care about education. A lot actually of our schools are happy to speak to each other and share those best practices and learn from each other as well, which is something we've been seeking to foster as much as possible. We got a question here from Stephen. Says, I see Century supporting lower order blooms, but what's your opinion on Century supporting PBL and interdisciplinary learning?
I think it's a really good question. And in actual fact, we have one of our very large schools in the centre of London is an international school, PYP, MYP and IB school. Now, in actual fact, I think it was fair to say the initial conversation that we had with them was, this isn't going to work for us. But when we've worked through the school, in actual fact, South Bank Hampstead has become one of our shining lights. So what they've actually been able to do is they've been able to integrate the platform where they see it's going to add value. So it might not be that they use it in every single subject area, but it might be used to support different areas of inquiry with a particular area of focus. Because of the flexibility a teacher has within it, they can assign different learning pathways to students that within a sort of a PBL or a sort of inquiry-based setting, the flexibility really does suit them. Now, similarly to that, we also had some questions around 11 plus. So those of you who work within London or within the UK, within the 11 plus, we had a bit of a challenge around, well, is this national curriculum aligned? Because our schools, we've got different curriculum with different expectations. But working at Fergus, I think working with your team, we've really been able to unlock different types of content. We've got 11 plus content on there now. It's not just linked to the UK curriculum. The versatility of it has been excellent, and we've been able to work with that. And one of our things on our roadmap is to think about creating our own content as well, which again, for those schools who want that flexibility, there is that opportunity there, which will be incredibly useful.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to upset Kira's schedule too much, and much I'd like to chatter away all day about Cognita, and it really has been an absolute pleasure working with Cognita, and some of the mobilisation that we've seen, and as the mobilisation at the centre and the diversity of different schools we're working with just makes it a really, really interesting collaboration. But I believe I'll be passing back to Kira now.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. So interesting to listen to the two of you. And James, I think what came across really clearly is the fact that Cognita, you put people at the center of what you do. And I think that's really key, empowering all those different stakeholders across your group. And I can safely say all of the people that we've had the pleasure of meeting in your organization have been extremely wonderful to work with. So yeah, thank you so much for that conversation. And I think we could listen to you for the rest of the time, but without further ado, we are passing over to Hastings, Madrid, over in sunny Spain. Jonathan Gunzi, your name's come up quite a bit already, so really excited to listen to you as Head of Secondary at Hastings, also joined by Laura Williams, who is Head of Key Stage 4 Maths. So they're going to be talking a little bit about Sentry. I remember really well when you first launched with us last April, right at the beginning of distance learning, and how you quickly onboarded all your students and got up and running so effectively, which I know you're going to talk about next. So without further ado, let me warmly welcome Jonathan Gunzi and Laura Williams. Over to you.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you, Chiara, for your introduction, and nice to see you again, James. Yes, so Laura and I are from Hastings School in Madrid, from very sunny Madrid for the moment, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about the journey that we've been on with Sentry. So I'll start a little bit as Head of Secondary, talking a bit about how I find it useful as a Head of Secondary, and then Laura will talk a bit more detail, both as a classroom teacher, but also as a lead for Key Stage 4 Math. So I've got a short PowerPoint to share with you just to structure my thoughts a little bit. Oh, is that working? There it is. Okay. Well, that's not the most interesting slide. We'll just get going straight away. Okay, so yes, we've been now going through this pandemic for quite some time. And like in many places, we faced a very sudden closure, which luckily we were able to adapt to very quickly. But as we were approaching our Easter holidays, I remember clearly our parents starting to panic a little bit, because our children, of course, in Spain were not allowed out at all. And they were saying, well, what are we going to do with these teenagers for all these days? James brought up the issue of staff well-being a few times already. And what we weren't willing to do was to cut short the holidays and say to staff, well, we're going to have to teach more lessons during this holiday. So we stuck to our holidays, but then we used Sentry to great effect, because we had the parents really supporting us. And it also enabled us to launch the platform without having to engage the teachers right at the beginning. So we did lots of assemblies, used lots of assembly time before this holiday. And I said to the students, right, you're going to have to do 3 hours a day, and that's it, no arguing, and we'll be checking up on you, which is one of the great things about this platform as well, is the ability for me to see the engagement of students. And this worked really well, and I'll show you our data in a minute. We were really able to capitalize on this. And the great thing about letting students just work freely on the platform was that the artificial intelligence, of course, would take charge, give them the right nuggets, but we had a huge amount of data when we really started after the Easter holidays. And so it became quite easy to find, like James said, a few volunteers that were going to use this a little bit more in the classroom, rather than just selling it as homework. And that worked really well for us, being able to say to teachers, look, these are our students, and this is what they've done already, and this is how we can help you in the classroom. And then after a few months in September, we started using it a bit differently. We had the one-to-one devices, which have been great for this. We had hybrid learning, which of course has been quite a challenge for all of us. And then we started using Sentry in a slightly more targeted way, which Laura will talk about in a minute. But why do we really like it? Obviously, it is so easy for the students to use. I know we talked a lot about the teachers before, about their engagement and their need for training, but actually the students can just get on with it. It is so easy to use. We have new students joining us in September, and we are now able to just say, look, this is the platform, this is how it works, and they just go with it without needing too much help from us. And well, you will probably have seen this before. But we really like how it complements teaching. Of course, it doesn't replace teaching, but it complements it so nicely because it is so chunked, and this bite-sized learning works really well for our students. What we've seen, I suppose, a big change this year is that primary has really got very engaged from year 3 onwards, and have answered so many questions, and it works throughout the age range because of the artificial intelligence behind it. And again, just showing you a little example here, how easy it is to use. And what I've liked about Century is that, things have progressed a lot. And they did listen to feedback quite a bit. In the beginning, students found it difficult to only be able to ask for a few answers and a bit of feedback. And then that changed quite rapidly throughout the time. And students and parents do really like it. I really like the dashboard personally, because this is the way in which we sold it to parents. As we all know, teenagers aren't the easiest to talk to about, well, anything probably, but about their education. They come home, how is your learning today? Oh, fine. And then that will be it. But this is such an easy way to start a conversation with your child. And that's what I said to parents. I said, look, all they've got to do is to go to their dashboard and just ask them a little bit about why they feel that they're doing so well with finding decimal percentages, for example. And I haven't put the whole picture on here, but there is a focus on to improve. There is a stretch myself as well. We talked a little bit before about stretching the most stable there. So all of that is there for parents to start a great conversation with their children. And that really helped, especially over that Easter holiday where parents weren't quite sure what to do with their children for all that time. For the teacher, I mean, this shows you just how easy, again, it is to use it. And we talked about training. I don't think there's a need for a huge amount of training. Once you see this, you can tell that your class is doing absolutely fine with missing numbers and doesn't need any work on this in the classroom. But some are still struggling with number lines, and you might want to just address that in the classroom. So this is how we sold it to teachers, saying, it just helps you on the one hand, have better information about your class, but also, and James talked about well-being before, also reduces your workload in terms of marking. This amount of detail, especially in English, is very difficult to get by in secondary because of the literature. Well, I know I don't need to tell you this, but because the literature aspect of things and the different types of marking, it becomes sometimes difficult for the teachers to focus on the apostrophes and the little things that in our school, especially here in Madrid, is very important. The majority of our students are Spanish speaking at home, and are learning in their second language. And this is the data, and this is great to see sort of where are the peaks and troughs, and when our students, well, you can see when our half terms are, for example, since September, but you can see there right at the beginning, we had a real peak there. And that worked really well to generate that data. And we can sort of see when our students are working well, but it goes into so much detail once you drill down, which is very useful. So where are we now in May 2021? So we've really moved forward. And for example, I monitor, it really doesn't take me much time, what the students are doing. And we have a daily reward system where each of the subjects is highlighted one day of the week, and the top 3 for the week will be featured in there. We have something called the secondary daily briefing. So all students will see that every morning in tutor time. And I will also send weekly messages home for those students who have been at the top. And it's only for a week. And I keep telling the students, look, it's not because you didn't do so much work the week before. You've still got a chance to be that student in there. And both parents and students really appreciate have seen their names and getting the messages home. But I think for us as a school which does accept students from slightly different curriculums before, so they might join GCSE not having done Key Stage 3, or might join A-level not having done IGCSEs. For our new joiners, this has been really invaluable. We are now able to say, well, we think there's a few gaps in your learning perhaps, and we can assign them bits of the curriculum we would like them to work on, and we can actually make that one of the conditions of joining, saying, well, you will need to do this. We can very easily put them in a separate class in the monitoring side of things, and then we can see whether they are actually engaging with that and whether they need any reminders of how much engagement we are expecting. And then also we use this for various intervention groups, and that's been really powerful in terms of easy monitoring and setting aside little groups of students. Obviously, the student is not aware that they're in a slightly different group, but our support department are able to push nuggets forward that they find more appropriate for those particular students. Our coordinators might look at our more talented students, push some nuggets towards them as well. And the students won't know any difference. They don't know which class they're in or which group they've been assigned. So I think I can't see my time anymore, so I don't know how long I've been talking for, but I am going to hand over to Laura now, who's going to talk us a little bit about the fantastic work she's been doing with Century for her classes and for her key stage.
Right, thank you, Jonathan. I'm just going to share my screen as well. Yeah, as Jonathan said, my role at Hastings is to, just trying to find it, is to, I'm assistant head of maths with a focus on Key Stage 4. So my job, well, my overall job is to support staff and plan the teaching and learning in year 10 and 11. And
sorry, Laura, so sorry to interrupt. You're sharing your Zoom screen rather than your presentation.
Oh, sorry. I can't. Sorry. Sorry about this.
If you stop sharing and then restart sharing, that should work.
Yeah. No. Yeah, found it. Thank you. Is that better?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I thought I'd go over the different ways that we've been using it. Obviously, after the lockdowns last year, when we came back in September, there was quite a lot of transition of getting everyone sort of back into the routine of school. And I thought I'd talk about the different ways that it has been used by students, by teachers, and also by myself in support and intervention that I've run with year 10 and year 11 this year. So firstly, with the students, after coming back to school, obviously the focus did shift away from the online learning on their day-to-day lives, because obviously they were back in school for us. But what you can see here is sort of the year 11 overview. And if you look, you can see the level of engagement for each form, and the total study time varies massively. And I spoke to a lot of year 11s about Century Tech. And some of the reason why, for example, 11B has got so much time spent by the students in that form is actually very skewed towards a couple of students who really, really enjoyed using the platform and got a lot out of it. And I think a lot of the others, they used it occasionally, they used it when the teachers asked them to. But what I was really interested in is that some of the students that really got into it really ran with it. And some of the benefits they said to me through talking to them is they said that they found that they could just dip in and out of it really easily. It was obviously really independent, because then the AI would just throw stuff in their way, stuff that they needed to do. And also it built confidence. One of the students in that 11B class was really not in a very good place at the beginning of September. And by Christmas, her confidence in where she was at, because they were not in a very good place mathematically at the beginning of year 11. And for her in particular, the confidence that being able to use Century Tech independently and on her own, the confidence that it gave her was something that I think was really, really valuable about the platform. So you can see the students can run with it, and they do differently. Teachers, we used it in the department in a variety of ways. Teachers across all year groups, from year 7 to 11 in particular, do use it to set assignments. There's no departmental policy, there's no direction in terms of how often a Century Tech needs to be used. So it is down to the individual teachers at the moment. But it's been particularly useful to set homeworks for both consolidation of classwork, if there's been particular topics being done that week, but also for revision. With maths, obviously, being able to recap previous learning is a really, really vital part of the way we structure our education. And being able to set a revision topic on something that we did 3 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, 3 months ago, is really valuable. And with the presentation and the teaching function within a nugget, it does mean that you can set a revision task on something that was old or older learning, and be confident that the students will be, if they get stuck, they've got a resource immediately there that is relevant to the work they're doing. And that has really helped the students to be able to, and the teachers to be able to actually access that homework independently at home. And obviously the the way that you can assess it and really quickly see how well everyone's got on, who hasn't done it, who has done it. It's for the burden of work on staff, it makes it a lot easier. I've also used it a couple of times for cover. Obviously, with continuing coronavirus and quarantines, cover has been a bigger issue this year in some areas. And you can see here an example of a cover lesson that I actually set.
Laura, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind just moving down? We're still on the first slide on your presentation.
You shouldn't be. I'm moving it.
Oh.
That's weird. Let me try. I'll try again.
Do you want to try? Yeah. To reshare and hopefully it will move down.
Can you see that?
Perfect. You're on slide 4 now, and then if you can go into present.
Slide 3. Okay. So here you can see I used this for a cover lesson, and because Century splits the content into different levels of learning, what I was able to do was, for a mix, because we have mixed ability classes, I was able to set 3 tasks that obviously increase in difficulty as they go, and then the students can engage with those tasks and try to independently learn or revise or review. And I can very easily see how successful that lesson was or how successful the students were in that lesson. And so my plan is to then do a follow-up lesson on this. And what I can do is go into that lesson with the knowledge of what they did when I wasn't in. And some of them found it hard, some of them really liked it, some of them like being independent of them, some of them don't. But it does give me the information I need to be able to plan a follow-up lesson that will be useful for all students, because I know who to get started where, I know who needs the support, and then I can plan that lesson so that every individual student is getting the learning and the challenge that they need. So it has been really, really useful for cover as well. And then the last bit for teachers is to support in the closing of gaps. As Jonathan said, we often have new students. Being in international school, we have lots of new students that join us at the beginning of the year, but also throughout the year as they move. And it's been really useful to be able to look at the curriculum that they've missed and be able to set them nuggets and show them how to search for their own nuggets so that they can actually start to check what gaps they have and independently try and catch up with what they have missed so that they can access where we are currently in the curriculum. So that's kind of how teachers have been using it. And then for me, running Key Stage 4, I've been in charge of doing support and intervention with my team. And I've been doing Year 11 support and Year 10 support. Year 11 has recently been much more of a drop-in sort of session. So we're in a room and the Year 11s can drop in to get help with whatever they need help on. And where I found Century Tech really useful in this environment was students who came in with a problem, and they came to me with a question or with a topic. I could go through with them, reteach it, go through it with them, check their understanding, find out where the problems were. And then on Century, together, we could find the appropriate nugget for them to do independently. And so they get that little bit of recap from me, but then they go home, and it's most valuable if they come back to that learning a few days later, or even later that night, and then try again. And then if they still struggled, they were coming back, or they were coming back to math support saying, yes, I got that now, I did my nugget, everything's great, but now I'm stuck on this bit. So it was really good for us to do that sort of individual direction that they needed for closing those gaps. And then Year 10 math support runs slightly differently. It's more of an intervention class, and I support the lowest in the year group, the students that are struggling to kind of bring everything together. And it's more of a lesson, so it's much more directed. But we tend to recap something and then I might do some skills and some problem solving. And what I've used with Year 10 math support, and you can see here the snipping of my dashboard when I look at that class is what I do is I'll teach them or recap something in the intervention lesson and then set them homework for them to do at home. And this is good because I've got students moving in and out of that maths intervention group, but all the kids that have ever been in maths support in year 10 remain in that group. So the students that no longer come can still actually access the work that we're doing in that maths support as well. And it's been really good because it gives me the information. I can email parents really quickly if they're not doing it, because I can see straight away if they are or they're not. And it also helps again with that, reteach something, get them to go away and practice it. And this is all additional work on top of their normal homeworks from their normal teachers. So that's kind of what we've been doing this year and how Century Tech has supported the maths department, mostly at Key Stage 4. And I thought I would share with you what the plan is for next year, because we're still getting our heads around it and still trying to find the best uses for it and experimenting. So I definitely am going to continue using it with support sessions, with that homework, and having my own little group or class of students that need that intervention so I can put assignments and nuggets in their way. What I'd also like to do is improve the consistency of use across students and teachers, so that, because what I saw in the year 11s with the students who really ran with it, the benefits that they got, I think the other students, they missed out on that. And there's an element of getting all the students to see the benefits that they can do. So next year, I'd like to make sure that we can get a wider group of students really, really engaging with it in their own time. And then my bigger plan is to use it as a revision plan for Key Stage 4 through department homeworks. And this will relieve a little bit of burden from the teachers, but also to build in that recapping, I think I will plan, using the planner function, an overview of what tasks need to be done by the whole year group week by week. So for year 11, that'll all be directed at year 10 stuff, and year 10, it will be directed at year 9. And I can use it looking at the curriculum to make sure it kind of supports where we're at and what we're trying to do. And that's something that I can do for my whole department. And then all the teachers need to do is just check that students are doing it. And we need to obviously find the balance between setting tasks, like quantity of task, also time on the task. And that's the difficulty as well, is when you've got students that are in different places, how do you compare the quantity of work they have done? And being able to see the time they've spent on something really, really helps us to be able to make fair judgments on the work that the students are doing on Century Tech. So that is really useful. So that's everything from me. So I'll stop sharing. I think we'll run over.
Laura. Thank you, and Jonathan, so much. I used to be a teacher, and it's just so nice to sit back and listen to the practical ways that you're using Century. I think sometimes as ed tech companies, we sort of sit on the other side of the fence, and it's just so wonderful to hear all the different ways that you're sort of embedding Century across your school. So thank you both so much. I'll quickly move on because of time. So I'll move you on to our next presentation from Northbridge House, one of Cognita's schools in North London. And we're joined today by a team of speakers. So we have Catherine Ralph, who's assistant head and head of upper school. We have Dilly Barria, head of digital learning and assistant head of year, and Aaron Young, assistant head of year. So over to you guys. Really looking forward to what you're about to say. Thank you.
And thank you for having us this evening to represent digital learning at Northbridge House Prep School. I just want to take a quick moment to introduce us. My name is Catherine, and I've been teaching at London Prep Schools for over 15 years. In September, I took up the post of assistant head. I'm also a specialist teacher of English. With a much greater focus on digital learning this academic year, I began to oversee the teaching of computer science in our school. My colleague Dilly has been teaching at Northbridge House Prep for 5 years and is our head of digital learning, teaching most of our computer science curriculum and lessons, and overseeing our team of computer science teachers. Her passion, enthusiasm, and energy for computer science knows no bounds. Aaron is part of our maths department here and is a keen leader of digital learning in the maths subject. He also is head of year 6. Just a quick word about Northbridge House. We are a co-ed school with about 450 pupils from year 3 to year 8. And we are based very centrally in London on the edge of Camden Town and Regent's Park. We are non-academically selective and focus on a very broad and very rich curriculum. Our pupils join us from all over the world, and we do view our students as global citizens. As James mentioned earlier, we were very lucky to be part of the Cognita pilot scheme, issuing one-to-one devices to every single one of our pupils. And we had great fun packing and unboxing devices back in the autumn term. Every pupil in our school has a laptop device, which is brought into school each day and taken home each evening. Having already been through lockdown part 1, we felt that the children's digital literacy was much improved by being forced into a digital world almost overnight. And the transition to working with devices more frequently and with a sort of half of the course approach was smooth. By lockdown part 2, the pupils were so used to working on a device that the move to home learning was pretty seamless. This has meant that we have had to update and move forward with our computer science curriculum far more rapidly than we might have had to without the pandemic. We as a school and as a department have been very mindful of wanting to enhance rather than replace as an approach to digital learning. And consequently, we have focused our use of EdTech platforms as tools rather than teachers. And I know that Aaron will pick up on this a little bit in a moment. This is a very brief overview of digital learning at Northbridge House Prep, and I will now pass over to Dilly, who will give you an overview of our curriculum.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. I am Dilly. I was requested to give you an overview on our developing vision for using EdTech at our school, and then briefly lead onto using Century Tech as a platform. Being head of digital learning here at Northbridge House Prep has been quite a rewarding experience for me. I'm very passionate about inspiring innovation among staff and students. I've personally embarked on a couple of projects recently at school as part of the digital experience we provide, which includes a podcast club and a digital newspaper club as creative avenues for the children to learn about and experience a range of digital skills. So when it comes to the curriculum, I often find that schools emphasize coding a lot. EdTech can often be seen as coding and categorized within the realms of computer science. So we refresh the curriculum so that students are more digitally literate. This is enabled to become more innovative in how they use technology across the curriculum. Now, while coding skills are essential, students need to find digital learning more purposeful than that, because what they learn extends beyond the walls of their classroom. And I found that an emphasis on coding has caused digital literacy to take a bit of a backseat. Not only is a third of the national curriculum focused on digital literacy, there are more important skills and knowledge we need to teach, and often coding relies on these skills. So what I mean by digital literacy is actually things we tend to take for granted. Things like using keyboard shortcuts, understanding the difference between a file and a folder, what a browser is, how to use a wrap text function in MS Word when working with images, how to pin frequently used apps to the taskbar, how to bookmark frequently used websites in a browser, the list just goes on. In our jobs in lockdown, we saw how vital it was to know how to use technology effectively for the purposes of delivering presentations and lessons. And, we need to think about what knowledge was actually required there. Some of us genuinely struggled with certain aspects of it, and we can't assume that students will just pick up this knowledge on their own accord just because they've grown up tapping phones and iPads. Sometimes you put them in front of a keyboard and they look like a deer caught in headlights. The role digital learning or computer science takes in today's world shouldn't, I believe, be focused on solely as a subject, but rather be integrated within the curriculum. Like most students across Cognita, our students are now well versed in working with platforms such as OneNote, Flipgrid, 3D, Teams. Our school has a range of platforms that we use to enhance their subject knowledge. One of them is Century Tech, And at our school, we've primarily used it for maths and English. It has been great in terms of providing immediate feedback, as James alluded to, and which Laura and Jonathan also demonstrated for their schools. It does help reduce our workload, but simultaneously, we're able to effectively use this feedback to inform and enhance our own teaching. So without further ado, I will hand you over now to Aaron, who will share the impact it has had on the quality of teaching and learning at our school.
Thanks, Dilly. Almost forgot to unmute. Great start. So I'm going to speak about how we used it in maths specifically. I'm just kind of following on from what Laura was saying about her use of it in Key Stage 4. So we've implemented CentriTech in 3 ways. So in class, both online, and since lockdown has eased, in person. We've also used it as an independent learning tool, and also kind of as an additional resource for home learning. So when we took on CentriTech, we implemented it mainly across years 5 and 8, but with a focus on 5 and 6. And at the beginning, we ensured that every class completed their diagnostic checks for their respective levels to ensure that they had the best of what's known as My Path on CentriTech. And for anyone who's not used it or seen it, the diagnostics give the pupils a series of questions based on a specific topic, just to check their knowledge. They don't get any answers or scores for these. And the idea is, so they're split into the general overviews of things such as maths, place value, algebra, fractions, decimals, percentages. And these results are used in the algorithm to select specific nuggets for that individual student's weaknesses. And these will appear in the My Path section. And that gives the students access to just drop in at any stage and have work which effectively they need to look over and refresh themselves on, which is actually, if I'm honest, it's one of my favorite sections. And it also works in 2 ways. So we get a lot of parents asking for any additional resources they can do at home, what they can do at home to help their child improve. Give me a list of topics which we need to work on. And this is just an easy go-to, and you can just say that they've got all of that on the My Path section. It will select it out. As we do more tasks in class, it will sort of whittle out the things which they don't need to look at. And it's good for that to keep running over. And also the parents are quite happy that you can give such a quick and immediate response to that. With respect to, we also use that as a homework once a week. With respect to the lessons, as James mentioned earlier, CentriTech was introduced to us during lockdown. During this time, I would try to run my lessons as normally as you can online. So, for example, I would be using the interactive whiteboard, modeling my examples, cold calling pupils to go through additional examples with them, and then giving exercises for them to do. Prior to CentriTech, I'm assuming a lot of us had issues with, or at least I had a lot of issues with, the variety of things, with uploading and downloading of documents, using shared documents with pupils, formatting issues with the document you've used, it's not appearing correctly with them, and then you asking pupils to enter in their answers in a certain manner, and then using all variety of things and more, which I'm sure everyone's had. And then the other issue, which I found a lot of online, was pupils working at different speeds through the worksheet. And with maths, that would cause situations whereby I would have to work through a question with one pupil. And what you have in class, where you can kind of go up to that pupil and work very quietly with them in their book, and very subtly go through that question with them, and therefore allowing others to work at their own speed and get through that question. Online, we didn't have that as an option. And you very often I'd find myself going through a question that everyone could hear and that some pupils had yet to go to. So after a bit of trial and error, I found CentriTech allowed me to sort of fix a few of these things. So firstly, it gives you models, which then you can use, and which then also meant that the pupils didn't have to take notes for themselves. So those models were there with that nugget at all times, so they could reference that. And that was obviously very useful during lockdown because a lot of pupils went home, they didn't have their books with them. And that didn't rely on, especially our younger years, having to have the organizational skills to have their own notebooks and keep their own notes from separate sheets. Secondly, I also found that the nuggets are very useful because they have the same question structure, but different values within them. So I was able to, after training my pupils to screenshot their question and post it into Teams, so that then we could use it to work through. It was very useful to have that so that I could go through the methodology of the question and the skills involved without necessarily just answering that one question for the entire class. That meant that pupils could listen to it and then implement that method into their own question with the different values, and still practicing the correct skills which they needed to. Another very useful benefit is the live tracking. And I'm sure Catherine can back me up on this one. Some of our students aren't necessarily the most engaged online, shall we say. And this allowed me to track exactly what they were doing during the lesson, how much of each nugget they completed, and in what time frame, which was an absolute godsend at times. And then obviously you can communicate that back to parents at home, just to let them know that work is being completed or not completed to any given level. Another help was that a lot of pupils had issues with connectivity and bandwidth, so they couldn't necessarily join the class on the chat, on the call on Teams, let's say, but they could still communicate over chat. So they could still get on with the work on Century Tech. They could still post me questions on the chat, and I could still respond to them in the chat, but they didn't necessarily need to be on the call if that was causing them problems. So when we got back from lockdown, in lessons in person and live, I slightly changed the way I would use it, in that I'm using it more as a review lesson as opposed to a teaching tool. As Catherine said, we're trying not to sort of use it as the go-to. So for example, 1 week's worth of lessons I would put into an assignment, selecting all the nuggets. The pupils would have one lesson and as a homework to sort of go through that assignment, and use both their books and the additional slides and videos which are available on Century Tech, to work through those nuggets and practice the topics. Major benefit of this obviously is that they get to practice independent learning. And also for me, this is the perfect structure of how to revise maths at all levels. You go back over your notes, you get some additional questions, reread your notes, try to apply them to the question. And then in this case, obviously the teacher's there to be there as a backup solution and to help guide you through that process. And I found that really, really helpful. Other benefits, as Laura was speaking about earlier, are there's very, very detailed tracking of people's work. So you've got the time they spent on each nugget, the time they spent on the question. You can see if they've just sped through it just to complete the work, and then they can come in and say they haven't tried it, and you can see that very clearly they spent 15 seconds on the last 8 questions in a nugget, which means they've rushed it. You can even see if they did it that morning before they came into school, which is great. But yeah, so for me, one of the main factors is that we can help them improve as independent learners and build that skill for them as they move up into secondary. The system does take a bit of getting used to for those especially who are less sort of technologically inclined. And the teacher side of things, there's a lot of getting used to where the menus are at this stage. But the pupils do find it quite easy to get into. Their end, the pupil view of the system is much cleaner. And I know that Century Tech are working towards making improvements, and I'm very much looking forward to sort of that journey towards the end product. But I found it very useful. So that's my part.
We do have some really good questions that I'd like to put to our panelists just in the last couple of moments. So I'm going to ask this question to all our panelists, because I think with the range of roles that you have, it'll be really interesting to get some different points of view on this one. So please do feel free to turn off your camera and unmute in order to answer. So we've had a question from Tim. How easy was it to get parents, pupils and teachers on board with using Sentry? Any key strategies that you could share? So would anyone like to take that one?
I'm happy to speak on that one. Parents were very, very keen to get on board. We didn't really have any concerns from parents. I think the two key things that meant that it was a very smooth operation putting it into place was A, that the children could have a completely bespoke experience of the programme. And I think as soon as you offer that to a parent and a system which they can take away and use whenever they like, the child can access it at any point in time from anywhere. And also, as some of my team mentioned, also for revision purposes, which is quite a big focus in our schools, parents are very, very quick to get on board. Because it was introduced in lockdown, being able to do a little video session with parents to introduce them to the platform means that they almost feel like they've got a little bit of ownership of it as well. And I think probably I'm not alone, having children of my own, knowing that the digital interface is much more usable for the children than it is maybe for the adults and the parents. So getting them, educating the parents about it as well is hugely beneficial.
Fantastic, thank you. Really good insight there. So just final question that I'm going to throw to Aaron or Laura, if that's okay, because it is a maths related question. So how does Sentry differ from other maths products that you're using?
I'll take that one, I guess. So we've used a couple of others. The main benefit of, or the main, I guess, USP of Sentry is the algorithm and the MyPath section. I think it's really, really powerful, actually. And the more I think you use it, the better it will get. I think there are, some areas where it could sort of interlink between the year groups that the students are in. So if a child is progressing through one school, let's say, if it could sort of have something which tracks their progression through the years as well. I mean, we've only been using it for a year, so I can't say if they do or not. That would be really beneficial to us. But yeah, the MyPath section is really, really useful. And it kind of gives you that freedom to sort of say, okay, you can try that and do a few more of those at home. And the detailed tracking is also, I've used some other products which don't have the amount of data available that we do in the use of Sentry Tech.
Brilliant, thank you. We are over, so I think I'll wrap up this webinar. Just on behalf of Sentry, thank you so much to all our panelists and our attendees that joined from all across the world to listen in today. And I think it all comes back to what James said at the beginning about people. What a fantastic group of people you all are at Cognita, and such a pleasure to be working with you and continuing this partnership that we have together. So just to say that if you are interested in Sentry, please do contact us. So my details are on the screen, and we'll also share them in the chat. You'll also see Charles Wood's details on the screen. He's our Director of International, which many of you will know. And final thing is that we have a bumper series of events this week. So we actually are running another showcase session tomorrow with Forest Schools. So if you are interested, we can ping the link in the chat for you as well. Do come along and get another listen in from another school that are deploying Sentry so effectively in their school. So that is all. Thank you all so much. It's been incredible to listen to you. And just, yeah, a huge thanks again to our panelists from in the UK and in Spain. So thank you so much and have a great evening. Thank you all.